Okay, looks like we are live. So, welcome back, everyone. This is Ryan here, and today I'm basically just going to be doing a very impromptu tutorial on bug testing. So, before I begin, there's just two things I'd like to mention. Number one, the reason why I decided to do this tutorial is I really will be working on a small little bug that I am currently trying to solve in one of my own applications. So, just so you're aware, I'll be kind of trying to fix the problem as I show you a couple little different things. So just bear in mind that, I think this is kind of neat because I'll actually be trying to bug test something and it'll be sort of a live example. But also, unfortunately, I might make a fool out of myself and not catch the error. So that's just part of the fun. But nonetheless, I'm going to be really focusing in on three particular topics. And let me just switch to the note view, and then I'll just kind of summarize them before we actually dive into the code. So let me just make sure that that is showing up properly. Just going to make sure that my notes page is within the margins of everything. And okay, let's just widen that a little bit. Okay, so there's basically today what I'll be talking about is sort of three testing strategies, and they're going to be varying kind of in usefulness and skill level. So let me just kind of lay them out, and then I'll briefly talk about them, and then we'll jump into the code. So number one, I don't actually have a name for this, but I think kind of indirectly you could call this instrumented tests, instrumented bug testing. Now, that might not be entirely, I'm going to use that phrase, but instrumented testing is also something that I believe can apply to unit testing and espresso testing and things like that. But just for the sake of this tutorial, what I'm going to refer to as instrumented bug testing is, let me just do a really quick example. So in here, let me just open up the app in question. So this is the app that I'm currently testing, Pause Trainer. There's a link down in the description box below if you'd like to check out the open source code. And basically what's happening is when I hit plus to add a new reminder, what's occurring is the time should be showing up as 12 o'clock, which is the default sort of, the default time that I would like alarms to be created at. So let me just show it instead of talking about it. I'm just going to hit the plus button. And you'll notice that it says 6:12 a.m. That is supposed to say either 12 or 12:30. I can't remember exactly, but the point is it's really not showing up how it should be. Now, here's also one extra thing, and this is a really important point. I'm going to click on the clock icon. Actually, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this application. And I think this will give a little bit of a hint as to what the actual issue is. So let me just go ahead and close that off. And if I recall correctly, it should show up now as the proper number. And that is correct. So this is sort of example number one, what I'm referring to as instrumented bug testing. So in this particular case, without even really writing any code, I've already gathered some information about the nature of this bug. So what I know just from looking at the situation is that when I hit plus and it creates a new alarm at 6:12 a.m., that 6:12 a.m. field or value, isn't getting entered into the database. It is getting entered into the database properly as 12:30, but when an alarm is first created, I'll summarize it like this. The state of the view, let me switch to full cam mode. So what that information tells me is that the state of the view, which is the visual thing, and the state of the database are inconsistent at when an alarm is newly created. Once I close the app or edit the alarm, then the view does become consistent with the database. I think I screwed up which hand, but whatever. So really all I want to point out there is that by sort of running the app and finding the bug in the application, which is one way you can sort of go about bug testing. As we'll see, it's not a great way to solve problems most of the time, unless they're really easy problems, but it's a really great way to get information for the next two steps, which I'll be demonstrating. So just to summarize, I'm going to write this out a little bit. Instrumented bug testing. So this is all on the fly, so you'll have to just bear with me, but I'll summarize instrumented bug testing. And again, like, don't necessarily refer to it like that in the industry, because that's kind of just the name I randomly decided to affix to it at this point. I think it makes sense. I'm testing a bug on an instrument, but whatever. Anyways, so I'll summarize it like this. See what information you can gather about a given bug based on how it behaves in the application. Now, one thing just to note about that, this is kind of a special case, because this is a clear example where I can tell quite quickly what the issue is. I don't know where in the code the issue is popping up, which is what we'll solve in a minute. But the important thing to note here is that I'm looking at the way that this bug is manifesting and behaving and seeing, okay, I'm pretty sure that what's going on is that the view at some point is just getting screwed up, and but the actual correct value is being put into the database. So the important thing there is just to realize that now that I know that information, it's going to make my search for the bug a lot more, I would say, specialized. So I might end up looking at the database, but I'm pretty sure at this point the database isn't the issue. I'm pretty sure the issue is the view state is just not getting drawn properly in the use case where a reminder is created for the first time. So that's basically it. Hopefully that makes a fair amount of sense. Also, if there is anyone asking any questions or anything like that, this is kind of a lesson, so I might answer a few questions at the end of this session, but for the time being, I'm just going to be teaching. So I'm not ignoring you on purpose, just this is lesson time, not Q&A time. If you would like to join me for a Q&A, I've started doing a Q&A session weekly, Sundays, starting 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or I believe that translates to 9:30 p.m. India Standard Time, and you can work out whatever you are in between if you are. So yeah, so that's the first thing. Let's go to number 2. So the second item for bug testing strategies is using logs, or log.d, and I'm trying to think, can I remember? So some tag, and then string some message, or I'll just say some string, which is basically what the log method looks like. So let's go ahead. Am I in full? No, I'm not. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the code, and I'll just kind of demonstrate really quickly what how you can use logs. So I know this is basic stuff for a lot of people, but I'm going to be covering multiple different strategies. The next thing we'll get into is a little bit more complicated. So let's kind of just give me a moment to think about this, because I really am going to be trying to solve this problem. So first and foremost, I know that the error is likely to be occurring in the part of the app which is responsible for creating a new alarm. Just because I wrote the friggin' app, I know that that's basically must be localized to either, let's just clear some space out of here. So it doesn't have anything to do with reminder detail. So reminder detail presenter, I'm not sure if anyone can really see that, but just really briefly, let me show you the packages we'll be looking at in the project, just so if you want to follow along and look at the code, you can. So this screen of the app is reminder list component, and I know that that's sort of the error where this thing is occurring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I open up reminder list fragment. Now, I'm not going to give you a lecture on model view presenter, but just really briefly, please, for the moment, think of this fragment as the view in model view presenter. And then, of course, we have the presenter. So I've opened up both the list, reminder list fragment and reminder list presenter. So with the information I kind of gathered from step 1 and also my knowledge about the project, I basically know that the error must be occurring here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to zoom in a little bit because I realize some people might be watching on lower resolutions, and we're just going to kind of figure out a way. So now, just bear in mind, at this stage, I probably wouldn't want to use logs. I would probably just go straight to step 3, but I'm going to try and use logs to maybe not so much solve the problem, maybe, but to more importantly just demonstrate how you can use logs. What I'll do is, let me just give a quick note about logs. I'll make notes with a dash. So logs only give you limited, quick access to information about the app during runtime. So basically, when I would want to use a log, it's kind of hard because there's just different use cases where it's better to use a log or better to use the debugger. But in a general sense, if I want to know something really quickly and I just want to slap one line of code and get an exact value, which I'll demonstrate in a minute, that's when I would usually want to use a log. The next step is a much higher power option. So let's just stick with logs for the moment and I'll just demonstrate it. Okay. So let's start with reminder list presenter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to partially remind myself of how this thing works, and hopefully also I'll kind of be able to explain it to you so you can see what's going on in the situation. So another file I'm going to open up is I'm going to hit Control-N, reminder list contract. So whenever I'm doing model view presenter, I like to do a contract interface between the reminder list presenter and the reminder list fragment. If you're not aware what a contract or an interface is, I do have a dedicated video which I am very proud of. I think it explains the topic of an interface in the context of Android and Java very well, so I'd strongly suggest you go check that out. But basically, the function of this class here, this interface, this is basically the first place I look when I want to know what these two things do and how they interact with each other. And when I say these two things, I'm referring specifically to the fragment, which is the view. I'll just say view pretty much from this point on, and the presenter. As you can see in this class, we have the sort of the parent interface, which has two child interfaces. And the first child interface is the view, unsurprisingly, and the second interface is the presenter. So basically, what this describes, these are the methods that the presenter is allowed to call on the view. Down in the presenter, these are the methods that the view is allowed to call on the presenter. So essentially, this contract here is like the sort of like the arbiter of, it's the binding contract, sort of like the arbiter of truth. Anyways, I've kind of tangented a little bit, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look really quickly at this method here, which says add new reminder to list. So with the knowing already ahead of time that the view will be calling this method, add new reminder to list view, let me zoom in a little bit, and it's going to be passing in a reminder, my first instinct is to look into where this reminder comes from. I don't know if that's the issue, but I know just as a pure matter of likelihood, there's a good chance that this is the issue, because in this particular scenario, I'm basically having the view create the reminder. So anyways, let's just kind of jump into the fragment, or the view, sorry, and we'll see kind of where this method is called and what it actually does and then I'll set up a log.d just to see how that works. And really quickly, I'll just check. Hey, what's up? I see we've got couple people joining. As I said before, just for the time being, I'm just going to be teaching a lesson, so I won't be interacting, but towards the end of the show, depending on if I actually solve this problem, I'd be happy to answer a few questions. And thanks for stopping by, Chetan. Okay, so let's go over to the presenter. So right off the bat, I'm going to be looking for this method here, add new reminder to list view. And the reason why I'm doing it, I know I'm kind of just reiterating things over and over again, but just to summarize, the reason why I think this could be the issue is because in doing my sort of instrumented bug testing and just doing like an information gathering run or test, I've seen that probably the issue must be related to the code which creates a new alarm. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's hop in to the fragment. Okay, so the method in question that I want to look at is fired when this button is clicked, which is a floating action button. So if I recall correctly, I've been using Butterknife for this project. So there should be a... Did I use Butterknife? Maybe I didn't. Sorry, I'm mixing myself up. I did not use Butterknife. But this is definitely the method here. So the first thing I'm going to take note of is, so I've identified this is the floating action button. For shits and giggles, I've called it Fabulous. So I know that this is the method that's getting called when I click that button. So I'm going to look very, very closely at this method on click. So again, I've identified that it calls presenter on create reminder button click, which is the method down here. Sorry, I might have mixed myself up a little bit, but this is the method which will be getting passed into the presenter, and then the presenter will make a decision. So what I'm going to do is just to demonstrate logs. Again, I would probably just go straight to the debugger in this particular scenario, but let's just get some information from a log, and that'll just show you how logs work. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually, prior to, I'm just trying to think. I'm going to comment this out just really quickly by selecting it and hitting Control /. And instead of actually calling the method on the presenter, I'm just going to get it so that it prints the log information into the Android monitor, as we'll see in a minute. So I'm going to say log.d. So the first parameter for a log is a tag. Now you can really use whatever tag you want. We'll see where this tag pops up in a minute and why it's useful, but just know that it's fairly arbitrary. Basically what I'm going to say here is I'm just going to say view, actually I'm just going to say view. At the moment, that's really all I care. This is just kind of like a unique identifier. We'll see where it pops up in a minute. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's say, log data. I'm going to create a new string called log data. And what I'm going to do is, let's say log data equals, and we'll start with, what should I start with? So, I don't think the information I'm going to get from this will really help me that much, but let's just say, let's say get date, which is a string. Now, so originally what I was going to do is I was actually going to output all of these as one string, but in having a second look at this, I don't really care about reminders.size yet. I don't think that's very important. It might be. I don't really care about the name of the reminder because that appears to be working fine. So instead of making this string thing, actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call getDate, which is this method down here. And I'm just going to, again, like I don't expect to learn a lot. This is just to show you how logs work. So now I've got this thing, log.d view getDate. Let's see it in action. So what I'm going to do is open up my emulator. I'm just going to rerun the app. It may lag for a minute. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my emulator over here. Hopefully I think it's still visible on the screen. I'm going to drag Android Studio over here, and you'll see why in a moment. So I see that the application is running on this device. And what I'm going to do is open up the Android monitor. I'm just going to make sure that it's connected. Sometimes if you're like testing with multiple devices and something like that, this thing might not be selected on the correct device or emulator or whatever, what have you. And this is basically where I'm going to be looking for the information. So what I'm going to do now, I'll see if, yeah, I can zoom in quite a bit on this. So if most of you are probably already aware of this, but this is the Android monitor. It basically will show you log messages from the device that you're testing. So I'm going to hit this plus icon again, and hopefully if I've set things up correctly, you'll see a log message pop up here. Yes, so that is exactly what I wanted. Let me zoom in, and you'll notice that it says view. So view is the unique tag. If I go back here, view comes from this value here, and it has given me the value returned by that, which happens to be 12. That's some kind of date. My brain can't even work out what that means right now, but yeah. Anyways, that's something to note because I'll need to figure out what that actually means because that could be part of the issue. Anyways, hopefully I've demonstrated kind of how logs work. It's one last thing. So why bother with the tags, or what's something you can do to, like, let's say I was getting a huge number of error logs and just logs, and I didn't want to have to sift through them to find this. What I can do is I can actually use this text field up here to filter the logs. So I'm just going to type in uppercase view, and you notice that only logs which contain that set of characters, view, shows up. Here is a pitfall. This is a dumb thing I did once, and it cost me like a whole day and a lot of headache. Here's a pitfall. Listen closely. There was one day, I can't remember which project I was working on, but I was using logs and I had filtered my logs. I had forgotten that I had left some text in here, and I think it was like some long tag. So what was happening was I was like freaking out because no matter what I did, whatever I tested this thing on, no logs would show up, and I thought it was like a major issue. Actually, it turned out I had just forgotten to clear this text field here. So yeah, it's a simple mistake, but hopefully you don't make it. Hopefully you can learn from my stupid mistake. Jesus Christ, I look pale and white. I need to get out and get some sun. Anyways, so that's basically number 2. Hopefully I've summarized that decently well. Number 2 is using logs or log.d. Hopefully I demonstrated how to use it. When to use it, my suggestion is if you think it might be useful, use it. Just see how it helps you. So let's get into number 3, and this is the last main bug testing topic I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to call this one using the debugger / stepper. So if you're familiar with, here I'll switch to, so if you're familiar with Eclipse and Android Studio and just good quality IDEs, usually what they'll do is they'll give you this tool called a debugger or a stepper or something like that. I think the stepper is just part of the debugger. But basically how the debugger works is it's going to allow you to run the app it's going to allow you to run the app, and then you can actually go like line by line through. I'll show you how it works and you'll understand it better, but just in the broad strokes summary of it, it allows you to like step through your code and pause the code as it's executing and things of that nature. So it's a lot easier to just show you. So I'm gonna just hop into the code now. And this is a really, really powerful tool. This is usually the first thing I'll jump to unless I think I can solve an issue really quickly with logs, which is pretty rare. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to webcam and code, and let's use the stepper. So in this case, I'm actually going to, let's just resize this stuff here. So I'm going to do that. Hopefully that's within view. I'm also going to stop this process because it's probably causing my computer to lag. I'm going to close down the Android monitor, and I'm also going to remove my log here. One thing that's just, again, a really quick note, how I used to do bug testing before I knew the debugger is I used to use a ton of logs everywhere, and then my projects would get full of them and I'd forget to delete them. I would advise against doing that. If you use a log, one little quick tip you can do to remember to delete it when you no longer need it is like you can write, I'll just undo this really quick. You can write your log and then just do like / to do, and then just say like delete this log when I no longer need it or whatever. Just, you know, say delete this or something like that. And that's just a quick little tip. Anyways, oops. I will delete that now. Whoops. And I'm going to reselect this text. Again, hit Control / and that'll uncomment it. And so here's what I'm going to do now. And hopefully I'll do this intelligently the first time. We'll see. And this won't be the first thing I test. So how does the... Let me just make a couple notes about using the debugger and stepper. The debugger works by adding, I believe they're called breakpoints. I could be wrong. I don't really care what they're called. I'll show you what they are, and that's a lot more important than what they're called. So the debugger works by adding breakpoints to particular lines of code in your projects. So how does that actually work, or what does it actually look like? I'll hop back into the code. And how it basically works is sort of in this little area beside line numbers, if you have line numbers activated or whatever, you can click. And what that'll do is it'll make this red sort of circle show up here. This is a breakpoint, I believe. Yeah, I'm just going to call them breakpoints and, you know, whatever. So basically what I've done is once I run the debugger, which I'll show you in a minute, it's going to know that this is a line where I would like to... What the breakpoint does is it'll give me a line which I can designate where I would like to pause the program's execution and see what the data is, what the state of the application is at that particular moment in the program's execution. So I've got that first breakpoint. I'm actually going to add another before I run the debugger. So let's look through the presenter. So the first method I wanted to test was this one here. Now there's another method which I'd still like to test, which is add new reminder to list view. If I had to guess, I'm going to just guess ahead of time that this is where the error is occurring. Because I know this is the method that actually adds one of these views to the actual application and draws it. So I suspect that's where the issue is occurring. Anyways, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the fragment and actually no, let's go to the presenter. So what happens, so let's just go through the flow of this application. One thing that I practice a lot, and I think it has, One thing I practice a lot, and I think it's something I'm pretty good at, maybe not. Um, my mind works very, very visually, and for me, it's not difficult to go through and just visualize the flow of information through the application and the methods and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do now is, and I think this is something everyone can do, I don't think I'm special, but what I'm going to do is show you one thing I personally do to solve problems like this, which is to just in my head, but also with the code, follow through the course of execution. Essentially, I'm like running a debugger in my head, except it's faulty because I'm relying purely on my head, which is an imperfect mechanism, but blah, 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 blah. Sorry, that got weird and philosophical. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so the first point of execution is, in this particular scenario, is when, of course, the button gets clicked, which occurs here. The second point of execution, I'll call it, is this method within the presenter, which is onCreate reminder button click. I'll scroll in, I'll go to the presenter and scroll down to that. Hopefully it's here somewhere. And then we have onCreate reminder button click. So this is the method that the view calls on the presenter to relay the information. The view is basically, the way that this works is that the view is saying, hey, this thing was clicked, here's the information that you need. It doesn't make a decision. I mean, it kind of makes a decision in passing the information through, but, you know, whatever. In my view, I don't see any other way that, yeah. Anyways. So we've got this method here, and I see that it passes in current number of reminders, I see that it passes in a default name, and I see that it passes in a reminder ID. Now, in looking at this, here's a thing right off the bat that I just realized I can change. So this is, so this is just a impromptu thing. This is a much better name, reminder ID. The name I gave it in the actual presenter. I'm actually going to change this to say reminder ID, because although it is technically a creation date, I'm making an ID based on the creation date. Reminder ID is more descriptive. I know this is a little nitpicky, but I think this is kind of a small but important point. So I'm just going to make that little change there, and that shouldn't actually break anything, but just a small little note there. Okay. So when I look at the flow of this application, I know some of you might not be familiar with the RxJava stuff. Let me just talk you through really quickly what this method is doing. So the first thing is, it's saying if the current number of reminders is less than 5, I don't think that's entirely proper because that should be less than or equal to 5. Less 4. I don't know, I'm not going to worry. I think this should actually be less than or equal to 5, but I won't worry about it. What this is supposed to do is if there are more, if there are, only allow up to 5 reminders at a time. Now this is exclusive, so I should say current number of reminders. If current number of reminders is less than 5, so 4 is acceptable, and you can add one more. So actually I think this is correct, but we'll see. Maybe someone will laugh at me in the comments, and rightfully so. Okay, so right off the bat, when I'm looking at this reminder, so let's talk about reminder really quickly. A reminder is one of these things here. A reminder describes this little view state thingy here. And as you can see, it's comprised of a default name, which is new alarm. It's comprised of a minute up here and an hour, which show up here. And I'm noticing right off the bat that when I create a new alarm and demonstrate the bug, 6 pops up. Oh, why is it? Oh, I need to rerun the thing. Just I've already demonstrated it. When I create a new alarm, it says like 6:12. I don't see 6 in here anywhere, so that's kind of a hint that this isn't where the actual problem is, but let's just kind of move on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a breakpoint right here, which is in this method. So basically this is some RxJava stuff. In a nutshell, all that's happening here is that I'm calling create reminder on a database. I'm listening for the result of that reminder of that database method, and if my write to the database fails, onError should be called. Otherwise, view.addNewReminder to list view gets called. I know that this is being called, but I'm kind of assuming that there's something wrong with this reminder object. Anyways, I'm going to shut up because I've been talking a lot. Let's see how the debugger works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'll just get rid of one of these reminders. And what I'm going to do is instead of hitting the play button, the run app button, I'm going to hit the debug app button here. And let's see how that works. Now, sometimes it's a little bit glitchy with emulators, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll behave for me. If all else fails, I do have a device I can test it on. Okay, it appears to be working. So once you've got the debugger running, you can go ahead and open up the debug window, and it'll give you some hints. So the next thing we need to do is we need to execute the program in the particular place where I have breakpoints. So what I'm going to do is, again, just hit the plus, and I'm going to kind of execute the program as I would like to do. And the first breakpoint that should be called is just in this method here. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to hit plus, which will fire on click, and boom. So as you can see, how the debugger works. So at the moment, I'll jump back to code in a second. So what's happened now is that the debugger has paused the execution of the application at that particular point, and also within Android Studio's IDE, it's going to give me information about that exact point in the execution of the program and the state of all the different objects, I believe, in that class, so to speak, and just information about them. So let's see what that looks like. So as you can see here, we've paused the execution on this breakpoint, and it's giving me information. Now I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So some of that information you'll be able to see as like these handy little tooltips that Android Studio will provide. I think when I jump to the next breakpoint, it'll give some more information. But also, I want you to look at this little window down here. It might be kind of hard to see. I apologize, but I don't know how I can zoom in more. But basically, there's this little tab down here called Variables. And what this does is it shows you the state of the different objects or variables or fields, or whichever word you want to use today, of the application, of this class, I guess. Or actually, well, whatever. Let's just look at it and I'll shut up. So first things first. I see I have this object reminders.size. Let's just look at it really quickly and see, just see what it says. And I'll just talk about it briefly. So I know just from memory that reminders is a list, an array list of these reminder objects. And when I look at it, I see it says the size of this list is 1, which is consistent with what's going on here. There's not really anything important about that. I'm just trying to talk you through what the debugger can show you. It shows like the fields. So for example, I know that this reminder, the reminder at index 0 of the array list has the value minute set to 30. It has the hour of day set to 12, which is of course the default. So again, not a whole lot of information that can be gathered there. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at this and not seeing any major errors. I'm not seeing a point where anything is inconsistent. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hit this play button in the debugger, which says resume program. That will resume the program's execution until it either ends or hits another breakpoint. So it basically executes until you stop it or you hit another breakpoint. So I'm going to hit that button. And what should have happened, let's see here. It didn't jump. Let's try that again. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the second breakpoint. And this is the one within the presenter that I just talked about. And here's where things get interesting. Now this is where I could solve the problem. So let's go over here. So right off the bat, again, Android Studio has given me a nice little tooltip and said this is like, I believe this would be like maybe this is the reference ID or something. I don't actually know exactly what this value is, but it's saying to me, hey, here's this reminder object. It's an actual object with this. I believe this would be a reference location, but I'm not sure. Let's go down to the variables thing again, and I really wish I could zoom in somehow. Well, I'll just read things out. If anyone's watching this and they know how I can increase the font size of this, please let me know for future reference. But I'm not going to mess around with it now. So let's look at this reminder object. And that's really the key thing. So just to recap one more time. So we've created a new reminder by pressing the button. And I didn't see anything that shows up as a major issue in this reminder. Now, one thing that could be an issue is maybe I've mixed up one of these things. That's not an uncommon mistake, and that's something I might look at. But I don't think that's the problem. I don't think it's likely the problem. It could be. Let's focus in on this reminder object here. So I'm going to look at the data which describes this reminder object, and I'm really looking for a 6, because just to reiterate for the 10th time, 6:12 is showing up when I want 12:30 to show up. So for example, actually I can't show you, but yeah, I think you probably understand what I'm saying. And so let's open this up. So once again, I'm not seeing 6:30. Sorry, I'm not seeing 6:12. The minute says 12. Wait a minute. Okay. I think I just found the issue. The minute says 12. The hour of day says 30. I might be wrong about this, but I don't think there are 30 hours in a day. So, I'm really happy that this worked out so well, because I have now seen basically what the issue is. Probably what's happening is at some point I'm assigning a minute value to what should be an hour value. Let's go ahead and solve this issue. I'm excited that this worked out well for a change, because last time I tried to do something like this totally live, like when I was learning Dagger live, it failed epically. So I'm happy about this. So and this was I don't really, I honestly don't care if you don't believe me, but I didn't set this scenario up. This is life actually being nice to me for a change. Okay, so I've identified an inconsistency in the state of this object reminder. I know that this object gets created here. So that tells me that this is indeed where the issue is occurring. Am I outside of webcam mode? Yes, I am. Good. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to shut down the debugger. There's one last thing I'll show you really quickly about it. I only showed you like the basic features. There's a couple other features like step into, step over, and these different things here. These do, unfortunately, this is a poor example to show you how this works in the context of solving a bug, but just for example, excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit step into, and what that does is it allows me to step into the next line executed. Actually, should I? Next line in this file. Next line executed. Let's do step into. And that takes me back to the fragment, and then it's telling me, okay, so it's passing that inconsistent reminder into this method here. Excuse me. And then, let me just make sure my microphone hasn't died. Good, it hasn't. And then, if I wanted to, I could keep stepping. I could keep stepping into it and doing all that stuff. Sometimes you need to do that. In this case, I already have all the information I want to know, so I'm going to hit the stop button, and I'm going to, yeah, close the debugger, and let's get to work solving this error, which I'm excited to do. So, I'm also going to remove these breakpoints because I don't need them anymore, and I don't want them interfering with other debugging operations, which is a minor point, but okay. So now that I know that what's occurring is that what should be an hour is getting set to a minute, and what should be a minute is getting set to an hour, I'm going to open up this reminder class. So I'm going to hit Control N, and I'm going to type reminder. And I'm going to look at the constructor. So when I look at this constructor, I see that the second to last value should be hour of day, which by default should be 12, and the last parameter in this constructor should be a minute, which should be 30. Let's go back to the presenter and see that this should be 12 and this should be 30. Let's go back one more time because I already forgot if that's correct. So yes, the hour is the hour, which is 12, should be the second to last parameter. The minute, which is 30, should be the last parameter. That has fixed the issue. The last thing I'm going to do, and then I'll open up the floor for questions. I'll just open up for questions, is let's see if this solves the problem in the application itself. Now, I'm pretty confident it will, but let's just see for demonstration purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start by clearing out the state. I'm just going to delete these two alarms. I'm going to close the application. Then I'm going to run it. And it's going to take a moment. Okay, great. Now here is the moment of truth. If I've fixed this thing properly, or at least if I've solved one of the bugs, maybe there's another bug that's going to pop up. I don't really know, but that's okay. I know I've made progress. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm just going to hope that it says 12:30 p.m. Boom! And that is how you solve a bug with Android Studio using log.d, using instrumented kind of bug testing, and using the debugger. And without further ado, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, that went a lot better than I expected it to go. All right. Anyways, I'm not actually going to be streaming much longer. Hey, what's up, Alex? Thank you for joining me. Привет. I'm going to give about 2 minutes if anyone has a question, and then I'm actually going to call it a day because I have other things to work on. But I tell you, it's nice when things go that well, because I truly didn't expect. I had tried to solve that problem before, and so I was a little bit worried about. I was a little bit apprehensive about trying to solve it on camera, but it turned out to work great. Anyways, yeah, I guess just in closing, So if you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and hit the like button down below. Um, Also, like a couple things, I'm not an expert. All I really try and do with these live things and sharing my knowledge is my goal is to, excuse me, my goal is to just share my experience with you, and hopefully it's useful. And if the stuff I demonstrate to you seems like something worth paying for, I would just kindly ask, if you're in a position where you don't have the money to send any kind of support my way, I understand and I am not offended, and I know what it's like to be broke. But if you do have some spare income and you'd like to send me a $5, please consider supporting me on Patreon or something of that nature. And that's basically it. I don't see any questions so far, so I'm going to call it a day. For those of you who have just joined me, oh, I do have one question. So JP Ventura is asking, would using toString be considered a security flaw because it would leak sensitive info? I actually don't know what the context you're asking that question is. So if you could just clarify that. Are you talking about a specific part of code in my, like, I don't know what you're referring to, where you're using. So I'll just give a minute because I know there's a bit of a stream delay. Yeah, I'll give a minute to clarify here. The question appears to be, would using toString be considered a security flaw because it would leak sensitive info in the context of using JSON? If that's the question, oh, so leaving in logs and leaking sensitive info. Yeah, well, actually, to be honest, like I really don't know. I don't have experience in determining whether toString can leak info. I haven't looked into that myself, so I can't really help you with that question. But I'll check into it later, or if you find the answer, please come back and let me know, because that's the whole goal with this stream and channel and everything, is that one of us is going to learn. So I'm actually going to call it a day. Sorry I couldn't answer your question, JP, but if you have other questions, sometimes I can answer them. And thanks for joining me, and I will catch you later. I probably won't have time to do another stream session until Sunday, but on Sunday, just one more time, I know I announced this in the beginning, but almost every Sunday, starting at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 9:30 p.m. India Standard Time, I'll be doing a live Q&A session where I basically just sit down for an hour or two and answer questions. So the reason why I decided to do that is to kind of modularize things and make it so that, like, for example, today I'm mostly just doing a lesson. On that day, I'll basically just be answering questions. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great week.